Hello, this is Monica Volkmar. Welcome back to another episode of Project GaitWay. Here we have a new chapter to observe. And as a reminder, this is my first time seeing these photos and the gait videos that we'll be about to look at. So you are witnessing me fumbling through my thought process. Hopefully it is useful, entertaining, whatever. Here we have our model for today, Tom. Tom has a left shoulder that has some crankiness. That's all I know about Tom. There's probably more. There's plenty more to know about Tom, but all I know about Tom is he has a cranky left shoulder, and we're going to take a look at it. Look at him, rather, not just his shoulder. So let's take a look at just his static organization. First thing that really stands out as I do a rough overview is there appears to be a sense of a left rotation in his whole body. And I mean, look at his head, look at his upper body, look at his pelvis, look at his left foot. I just have the sense that everything's a little turned to the left. I'm not sure if you listened to or watched my last video or many past videos, I often say how much of a mindfuck transverse plane can be when you're looking at it from this frontal plane perspective. But I really do have this perception of his whole body being turned to the left, with his left arm more visible than his right arm. So whether that is his torso turned to the left, or it's just his left arm farther behind his body, or it's both. Not sure yet. That is interesting. I do have the sense that his left shoulder sits a little higher than his right shoulder, but I'm not sure if that is coming from his spine being side bent, laterally flexed to the right. Doesn't really look like it is. Could it be his position of his scapulae on his body? I hesitate to make any inferences about the position of his right shoulder or his arm because it's so hidden. But I do have the sense that his right scapula looks more protracted, more rolled forward. Not sure if that's actually his shoulder or it's his whole torso. So again, we'll take a look from the front view. Maybe we'll get a bit better information there. But down into his legs and feet, it does look like his left foot is more turned out. You can see about 4 toes sticking out, while on his right foot, you see his big toe actually on the inside part of his foot, so pointing more straight forwards. Now, is it that his right tibia or leg is more turned in and his left is more turned out? Or is or what I meant to say by that is the issue that he has an internal rotation through his right leg and the left leg's normal? Or is it that his right leg's normal and there's too much external rotation in his left leg? I'm not sure yet. I have the sense that his left knee looks a little more bent, which would be natural to see with a leg that's more turned out like that. When the tibia is more pointing outwards, it will cause, hopefully, and I say hopefully because this is the mechanism we want to see in the knee, that when it turns out, it will flex the knee as well. And I have the vibe that his left knee is a bit more flexed, but we'll compare that to his side profiles. That might give us some more info. But definitely the sense of everything being twisted to the left. Just the angle of his ears look very different too. Okay, I'm gonna stop staring at this back view And let's go to a front view. And what's really interesting, from the front view, it looks as if his body is leaning to the left as well, almost like his left shoulder is lower than his right shoulder. Which is really interesting because from the back view, doesn't it look like his right shoulder is lower than his left shoulder? So what's going on? That's a head scratcher. Let's take a closer look at what his shoulders are doing. So if we look at the front of his shoulders, there's this sense that the creasing in the front of his shirt in his pec area on the left, there's more creasing there, and it looks like his collarbone is sitting a bit more forward, his shoulder girdle a bit more forward, more of a protracted scapula on the left. And it looks a bit more like an upright shoulder on the right side. Let's look at the back view again. Really interesting because from the back, it almost looks like his right scapula is more protracted. From the back view, trying to gauge if it looks like his rib cage looks like it's shifted to his left. And if you look at this space or the amount of his body that you can see, or the amount of space between his arms and his body, no, it's tough to say with that rotation that it looks like is there as well. From the front view, yeah, it looks like there's a bit more space between his body on the left side, between his body and his arm, and his right side. What that might be telling us is that his left arm is sitting out more to the side, more abducted. But it also does look like there's more of his rib cage shifted over to his left leg. So a rib cage that's shifted left and an arm that's floating off of his body to the left. That's really interesting. You can see in this image too, it looks like his right hand is more in front of his body than his left hand. So is that coming from his elbow? It almost looks like his elbow is flexed, like he's going to come shake my hand. Is that his elbow or is that his whole arm? We'll see from the side views. It's really curious what's happening with that illusion of his upper body though, because from the back here, it looks like the right shoulder is more protracted, right scapula, but that's not the case. So it could be that illusion there is just his body being more rotated to the left, making it look like that shoulder is more protracted. But in reality, yeah, I think we can say, well, I can say, I don't know about you. I want to say that his spine looks more like it's rotating to the left. He's got a bit more flexion in his right elbow and a bit more abduction in his left arm. And that's really interesting to me, that there's this shift in his rib cage to the left and his arm that's floating out to the side. So that's his shoulder where he's having some trouble. I wonder if we'll see it actually being able to abduct, and what we'll see with the lateral flexions in his spine when he's walking. Very curious. Okay. And that right elbow, I wonder if anything happened to that right elbow, that it's just sitting in that angle. Okay, let's look at his legs a little bit. Something's interesting with his left knee. I have the sense that he's shifted onto his left leg a little bit. It looks like his pelvis is sitting more on top of his left leg, but also his torso even shifted farther over to his left leg. Lots of standing on that left leg. What does it look like in the back view? Hard to say from the back view. I mean, I almost want to say from the back view, it looks like he's standing on his right leg more. This is definitely a confusing one for my brain right now. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's you too. I'm going to leave that one up for interpretation as we go. The sense that I do have of his left leg, however, that's really interesting to me is it does look to be more bowed outwards. The left lower leg looks more bowed outwards, or a varus, which is it's interesting because a varus in a tibia, a varus knee angle, that should not have an externally rotated tibia coupling with it. Now, in this front view, he's standing more with his feet pointing forwards, but we can see there's an interesting angle in his ankles. With that varus tibia on the left, it will cause this sense of bowing out at the top of his ankle, especially from the back view. We should see that as more of a bowed out, a bowed at the top of the Achilles. It's hard to say because his foot's turned out. So he's done something maybe to make that, to hide that. So it might just be the way he's standing here. He's deliberately putting his feet forwards, or in the other picture, he accidentally had his foot turned out. Whatever the case is, I'm also really drawn to the angle of his patellas. And it's so cute. The impressions in his patella on the left, it looks like there's a little smiley face. Oh, that's super cute. But it looks like his left patella is almost tilted medially a bit more. So I wonder if he has any discomfort in that left knee. I know he has more discomfort than his shoulder, but I didn't get the full list, and I decided to jump in and do the video before having the full list. So it will be revealed. Looking at his feet now, I'm going to suspect that his left foot will be more everted, because it looks as if that bowing in his ankle is more pronounced on the left. And if you look at his toes, the tip of his big toe on the right is sticking up to the ceiling a bit more. And on the left, it's down to the floor a bit more of a plantar flexed big toe on the left foot, which is a pronation mechanic. So it looks like there's a bit more general eversion, pronation vibes on the left, but with a weirdly bowed out tibia. Okay, now I don't want to make this into a rule or anything because it's definitely not, but I'm just I'm struck by how many times I've seen a bowed out tibia in relation to someone who has a mass management strategy that involves really shifting onto one leg. And we're seeing this leftward shift with his whole body, and that continues to, or not, maybe not continues to, because we don't know what's causing what, but it appears to be in conjunction with a tibia that's pushing out to the left as well. So I'm really curious about what this left inclination is all about. Let's look at a side view. So right side view, we mentioned that it looks like his right elbow is more flexed, or I mentioned, you listened. Does it look like his left elbow is more flexed? Yes, it does. Do you see how his hand sits more in front of his body? On this side, does not. From the side view, you can even get a sense of the rotation in his torso. From this side, can you see there's less of a sense that you can see the front of his t-shirt, like more of the front of his t-shirt is hidden. But from this view, you can see more of the front of his t-shirt and his chest. So it gives me the sense that he's rotated to the left. That elbow being flexed is interesting. Now on this left shoulder / arm, do you see how his arm looks more internally rotated from this side view? You can see his elbow sticking more out to the side. And here his elbow is pointing more to the back, so it's a bit more of an externally rotated arm. So we can see another potential structural, postural understanding of why his shoulder might be grumpy. So if you want to feel this, put yourself in Tom's position, rotate your rib cage to the left, but don't let your left shoulder blade retract. Just keep it where it is. And maybe you even want to roll your left shoulder forward. So you're rolling your shoulder forward, but rotating your rib cage towards that left shoulder that's rolled forwards. That should give you a sense of kind of a grimy, uncomfortable position or feeling in the front of your shoulder. Now hold that, shift your rib cage to the left, and then slightly lift your arm out to the side on the left. And that gives me all sorts of not pleasant feelings all the way down into my fingers, actually, down my arm. So quite a bit of, stuff going on there in that left shoulder. I wonder what happened there. One quick look at the side views. Well, just what stands out really is how far forward his head is of his body. So there's quite a bit of extension in his neck and flexion in his upper T-spine as his head goes forward. But we have a pelvis that's it looks posteriorly tilted and pushed forwards. And it looks as if his weight's all on his toes with his rib cage, maybe slightly behind his pelvis. So there's some sagittal plane stuff. He looks like a guy who probably does a lot of squats and deadlifts. Well, he's a personal trainer and gym owner. So I would imagine and from the look of his equipment in the background, there's a trap bar hidden there. He probably does a lot of squats and deadlifts. And I see that with a lot of heavy lifters as they develop a bit of that pelvis tucked under, like lockout at the top of a deadlift stance. So I would be really curious about how well his hips are moving in the sagittal plane, whether he can flex his hips and extend his hips. Okay, but interesting stuff. Let's take a look at his video now. So it's going to be maybe not as easy to see because he's wearing black and there's a black background. Let's see what we can look at. We'll watch in full speed first. You can see that right elbow. Well, both elbows kind of flex, but that's very interesting. Very interesting rotational stuff. Watch it's like that right arm is really right arm left rotation of the spine. Do you see that when he swings his right arm forward? It's mostly with his elbow and his spine really twists to the right. Show us one more time, Tom. He doesn't seem to rotate through his pelvis. Whoop. Let's watch that again. Oh, here's a front view. Lovely. Just looking at his legs. He doesn't really seem to extend his hips. It's almost like his pelvis stays locked in that posterior tilt. He doesn't seem very happy with that right leg, just the way it looks when he swings it forward. Does not really seem comfortable. Let's watch that again. Do you see how his leg on the right, it does this little like wiggly thing when he swings it through? Where it gets more pronounced the more he walks. Like he's going at a faster pace here. He's probably more comfortable in the beginning. Watch his right leg, how it starts to do this flick around thing. Right about now, it looks like he starts to get a little uncomfortable. There it is. Like he wants to stay more over his left leg, and it looks like swinging that right leg through is becoming more burdensome. And do you recall how that was his tibia that was more internally rotated? So I'm curious about how well that knee and hip are moving, if anything happened on that side. And is that why we're seeing so much of a leftward everything? Something on that right side at one point that became a problem? Accident on the right leg. Let's see what it looks like broken down slow-mo. So we'll take him through a few steps. Here's one. I think we should actually let's get him into the part of his cycle where things start to get a little sloppier looking on the third round. All right. Okay, so step one, and we're gonna get into. Ooh, looks like it's gonna be. Oh, okay. We need a sip of drink. Okay. So even just getting him into the first step one, step two, into mid stance on the left. Already the story his body is telling me is that something's not happy on the right. So let's watch how he swings his leg through into a right heel strike. Where his heel first lands on the ground. And that's not such a bad position for his foot to land in, but we don't know really because we haven't seen his other side yet. But in terms of if we were just looking at this one snapshot, he's got a foot that looks to be landed not in a pronated position. He's more or less on the outside of his heel, more than the inside anyway. He looks pretty level with his pelvis. He looks pretty level with his shoulders. He is looking down though with his head, or it could be that his T-spine is just a little flexed at the top there, which we saw in his static posture. So not too much to see here, but note that this arm, he's holding that posture in his elbow still, where his elbow is flexed. Now, when an arm swings back, it should extend in the elbow, extend in the shoulder. But his is still flexed. So that could be just something to consider. If he has this structure that stays flexed the whole time through and never extends, then I would be curious about how much that is a significant body part to work with. So let's roll him from heel strike into a pronated right foot. Ooh. That is pretty interesting. So just look at how his foot wants to go on the ground there. Does that look like a nice pronation? Hopefully you are shaking your head right now. So we said it looks like he lands in a pretty good position in heel strike, but then little do we know what comes next is that his foot stays inverted, meaning it stays on the outside edge of his foot. And it almost looks like his big toe moves down to the floor. Does it? It looks like, I was going to say, it looks like he lands first with his toe before the metatarsal head gets down. I'm not so sure about that. We'll have to see from the front view. But the fact that his if you watch his medial arch, you can see all this space under his arch, and see how the shape of his Achilles there, it's inverted. That foot is just staying inverted when it should evert. That tibia wants to internally rotate. So I'm curious if anything ever happened to this right knee of his, or to his foot or his ankle, that would have held him in this position for whatever reason. Another thing to note here, look at the shape of his pelvis. Does that look like more of a, this is the pelvis from a side view, and this is anterior, this is posterior. So here we'd have an anterior tilt. Oops, that R is supposed to be anterior, posterior. And this would be posterior tilt. Does it look like he's in more of an anterior or posterior tilt with his pelvis? Looks like he's still quite posteriorly tilted, just like we saw in his standing posture. Now, the relationship that should happen, we have an anteriorly tilting pelvis. You'd want to see that put a little bend in the knee, and in the feet, there'd be a little bit of pronation. However, it looks like what we're seeing here is the opposite. We're seeing a posterior tilt, the straight knee, and a bit of, I don't want to call it supination of his foot because I don't think it's really clean quality motion in his foot, but it's definitely not pronating. And you can see his whole body already starting to twist to the left, like he's really avoiding getting weight into that leg. This hip doesn't look like it's moving. It doesn't look like it's adducting. It doesn't look like it's flexing, and it doesn't look like it's internally rotating. Looks like the one thing he is doing with that hip is getting quite a bit of external rotation, and you can see that by how far his pelvis is twisting to the left, away from his left or from his right leg. And then at the same time, having that posterior tilt in his pelvis is going to externally rotate the hip more, just by virtue of the posterior tilt. So he's missing everything, but got a ton of external rotation working for him on that right side. So I wonder if he has any discomfort in his butt or in the front of his hip, anywhere in that hip. Okay, let's move him along. See what his mid stance on the right looks like. And you can see how fast that right arm rather swings forward. How his whole body is going left. So if his whole body is going left, so rib cage left and pelvis left rotation, that means there is zero articulation in his spine in the transverse plane. His spine is moving like one unit, like a block. If we were to have opposition between his pelvis and his rib cage, then that would give us some rotational quality to his spine, but it's just stuck in one piece as of now. All right, and as we look at his mid stance, we can look at that knee. Looks like it locks back pretty quickly. You see that it's like kind of bending and then boom, straightens really fast. So I do wonder if there's any grumpiness back there in the knee, behind the knee maybe. Just how much it's stretching at the back. Now let's Just take a look at, here's the degree of external rotation in his left lower leg. Let's remind ourselves of what that looked like coming through on the right. Yeah, there's a little bit less external rotation. There's more internal rotation through this right tibia. And we can see that really clearly when it lands there. Ugh. And then we have, yeah, a lot more external rotation on that left tibia. Okay, so let's see how he goes into a left heel strike. Okay, this is kind of interesting here. So look at his pelvis, and I know, transverse plane is hard to see, but I think if I can see this, I think it's a thing. So do you see how his pelvis here in his mid stance, it's rotating to the left? Now, we actually want it to be rotating to the right, but maybe he's still going to rotate it to the right. Maybe it's going to get there. But do you see how it stays left as he goes through his swing? Left, left. He goes more left, left, left. He keeps rotating his pelvis left. And now this is a place where his pelvis really should be rotating to the right. With the left leg swinging forward, his pelvis should rotate away. But it's not. So what that's giving us is possibly like too much internal rotation into this left hip, which might be causing a lot of tension down the back of his leg here, overstretching the back of the hip. Doesn't look like a comfortable situation. So I wonder if he is able to rotate his pelvis to the right. That's my first question. Can you rotate your pelvis to the right? We don't really see much of a shift in his pelvis, but we do see that lean over to the left of his spine and the rotation to the left. We've got a left lateral flexion-ish thing going on and a left rotation to the rib cage and spine. There are lots of mechanics that are taking him to the left and not a lot that are taking him to the right. So I'm really curious about how he actually is going to get his weight into his right leg. What is he using to do that? All right, let's see what happens when he goes into the left mid stance. What's happening there? It looks rather uncomfortable the way something's awkward about the way his foot is coming off the ground there. I can't quite pinpoint it. Something about his knee. Like, do you see how his knee, it starts to actually externally rotate through his tibia when he goes into his toe off? So he's got contact on his big toe side of his foot, but his pinky toe looks like it's off the floor. Like when he's rolling through his foot, He wants to avoid getting any weight on the pinky toe side. Now, this could be completely off mark, but I'm really curious about whether or not he did anything to his fifth metatarsal, like broke his pinky toe or something. Did you break your pinky toe on your right foot? Maybe not. I don't know. Just playing the guessing game. Okay. Anyway, I was trying to get him into his mid stance and I got distracted by what looks like an awkward knee and foot. Yeah. Remember how I mentioned that it looks like his left tibia was more externally rotated? Well, look at this little bit right here where his right tibia does externally rotate, and then it flips back forwards again. But it's different than on his left leg. Let's just take a look at how that left leg comes off the ground. It's a little cleaner. Like the way that his foot peels off the ground on the left side, it just looks a little nicer. It looks like there's less weirdness in his knee. Whereas here, yeah, there's something odd about that. Okay, let's go on though. I want to see him in his mid stance on the left. Oh, this is super interesting. Okay, so I mean, if you just look at him in his static mid stance, it looks like if his body wasn't leaning to the left, he's pretty much got his weight between his 2 feet, meaning that I don't know how well he's able to get his pelvis onto his left leg either. Like his pelvis is right between his legs, but in order to be in a mid stance, you kind of need to have your weight a little bit more over top of your leg than that. But it looks like his body's doing a pretty good job at helping him stay there compared to his right mid stance. Look at that difference though. Look at how much his pelvis and his spine are rotated to the left in this mid stance and how it looks like he is actually standing over that right leg. Like if you were to stand on this guy's side, try to push him over, I think he'd be pretty solid there. But if you were to push him over while he's standing on his left leg, I don't know how stable he is here. I don't know if he'd be able to hold himself up if someone pushed him. So if we were to choose like which leg do you like standing on better, I would say neither. I would say you probably are more stable standing on your spine than standing on your legs. Left spine is your favorite leg. Okay. So let's see, how does he get his weight towards his right leg? We do. He does kind of shift his pelvis there. More so than he does to the left. He does shift his pelvis to the right. Actually looks like he crashes pretty hard into that right side. Doesn't like it, spins out of it, but can't quite get to his left leg. Does a big lean and twist into his left leg with his torso. So it doesn't surprise me that he's got these left shoulder things bugging him, but I wonder about his right leg having some trouble. Let's look at him from coming forward towards us. And see if we can just tune into his shoulders a bit more, since the left shoulder is the only thing I know that he really complains about being uncomfortable. If you had to pick where he's going, it looks like he's walking towards something over to the left, but he's actually walking straight forwards. But his body is so pointed to the left there. See how turned in looking that leg is on the right. So pronation of the foot is when we'll see the big toe meets the floor. When does that happen? Right about there. So it does really look like more of his torso is over his left leg than pelvis. Pelvis looks like it's staying a bit behind to the right. And what makes sense about how he's moving is, well, if you just, ooh, you see that? Okay, backtrack. Too many thoughts at once. His left leg swinging through. Do you see how much it externally rotates here? So let's say that you have your right leg behind you. Here, this is where you should have external rotation in your hip when the leg's behind you. Now, when the leg swings through, since it's already externally rotated, and ideally it's the most externally rotated it's going to get to in the gait cycle, the only thing the leg should be able to do from here is to internally rotate. But his leg, do you see how it starts to externally rotate? His knee points out to the side. His tibia points out to the side. Everything points up to the side. But then it really quickly turns inwards again. So that is super wonky. Pretty sure that was not happening as much. No, it's not happening as much on his left leg. It's happening a little bit. And you know what? If your pelvis is posteriorly tilted, both your femurs might be in an external rotation, and that's how they can move. But especially there, I really would be interested in quality of his right hip internal rotation. Is good or is not good? So what I was going to say before I got sidetracked by looking at his leg is you can see again from the front view that he does have more of this leftward rotation in his pelvis. Pelvis rotation left. Which leg do you think that is going to be more easy to swing forward, left or right? Hopefully you answered it's the right. With the pelvis rotating left, that's going to put your right leg forward. And he seems to be stuck in this position of his body where his right leg is better at going forwards. I'm really curious about if he can put weight into the outside of his right foot and if anything is preventing him from getting there in his history. He looks, remember from the back view, it looked like he wasn't pronating this foot. It looked like his arch was not going down to the floor. But from this view, it really looks like it doesn't have good contact with the lateral border either. Look at how his big toe comes to the ground faster than the rest of his toes. And that's what it looked like from the back view as well, but I wasn't sure about it. But his big toe is leading the way to the ground, meaning that his whole foot is probably everted, but maintaining a rigid and high arch. So it's neither pronated nor supinated. It's stuck somewhere in no man's land. And I doubt he's getting much pressure into the outside of his foot. So that's my main question right now is, did anything happen to your right foot? And is that preventing your pelvis from rotating to the right? Because if you think about what will a right rotation in the pelvis do, it should supinate the right foot. It should cause some rotation through the leg that goes all the way down into the ankle, and it supinates the foot on the right side. Now, if you had something happen to the outside of your foot and you tried and you supinated your foot, then the weight should go to the outside of your foot. But if something happened there that made it not feel super safe or trustworthy, then you might avoid actually rotating your pelvis that direction in order to keep the pressure off the foot. So I know I'm really getting stuck into that foot, but that's where my mind is going. And I've seen it a lot of times where people have broken their fifth metatarsal and it causes chaos. Okay, I said I was going to take a closer look at that shoulder, but I don't know. I guess it would depend if anything actually happened in his history that would cause his shoulder to be stuck in the position that it is. But let's see again. So if we look at here, about is where we'd want to see his full approaching end range arm swing. Both arms look to be quite in front of his body still. So we know this right arm struggles to swing back. That elbow. I wonder if anything happened to that elbow. Another thought process. Let's just watch if that right arm ever actually gets behind him. So here's where we want to see his right arm extending. Now, let's see. So his arm flexes. Does his left arm extend? Does it extend as much as his left arm extends a little more, or does it? It goes out to the side. It definitely goes to the side, but does it actually extend behind him? Not really. So both arms are having trouble extending. With an arm that's abducting like that, it would make sense he might have a little bit of discomfort across the top of his shoulder. And with the amount that his spine is rotating left and that arm staying pretty stagnant, we might expect there's a bit of grumpiness in the pecs, getting compressed and shortened, and not ever being able to open up the space, which would happen if his spine was able to rotate to the right, which I don't think it does. If his elbow on the right could extend, that would pull his arm backwards and his rib cage would follow. But as we can see, oh man, so his arm starts to extend, doesn't quite go there, and right here it starts to flex again. So this is where his right arm should be getting into end range extension. It doesn't get to extension at all. And not only that, it begins to flex again when it should be extending. There's just nothing going on with this elbow. Okay. So main things that are standing out to me are, what's up with this elbow that doesn't move? What's up with this right foot? Did it have any accidents? And are those two things keeping him stuck in this left rotation of his whole body? Now, obviously, I don't know anything about Tom. I doubt that I'm on point at all, but I'd be curious to hear what really has happened to this body. Now we have a bonus side view video, I think. We'll just quickly look at that. I've been going for a while, I think, but I'm super curious that I saw there's a sagittal plane view as well that we can look at. All right, I don't want to hear the sound, so not that I don't want to hear the sound, but I get annoyed with gym music. Okay, so let's just watch this in some slow-mo. Let's put it at half speed. What do we see? Yes, we can see you. Looking straight forward. You can even see that kind of homologous pattern through his body, meaning that his pelvis and his rib cage rotate the same direction as each other. They don't oppose. I think that was it. Okay, short video. So let's just go a little bit broken down phase by phase. Left heel strike. Just see his head being quite forward of his body here. Let's watch how that right arm swings back. Doesn't really quite get behind him that much before it starts swinging forwards again. I never look at sagittal views, so I'm not even sure what I want to say about this just yet. Remember how it was kind of weird the way his foot was coming off the ground? So look at the bend in his left knee here, or sorry, that's his right knee. And let's just compare that to his other side. So look at the amount of bend that goes into his other knee. Bends quite a bit more on that left side, doesn't it? And that was the knee that had more of the external rotation in it. I'm not sure how that plays into this. But it did appear like there was something that looked like it was making it not a comfortable thing for him to actually shift his pelvis towards his left leg. And I wonder if there could be anything to do with that. That knee doesn't ever seem to really straighten fully, does it? So it's still kind of bent there. Let's look at his right knee. The right knee is kind of similar. Actually, the right knee lands even more bent. Look at that. So it's like his knees are bending at the wrong time on either leg. He lands with a bit too much of a bent knee and heel strike. We want the knee to be getting extended. And here, his left knee does look like it's more extended. Let's look at the other side view. I'm just going to say a few more things about his knees, and we'll wrap this up for now. Okay, come on, let's see that. Okay, so then we see his left knee. We're probably going to see it bend quite a bit here. Yeah. So if he's bending through that left knee too much, it's not what we want to see in terms of a good quality rigid lever for a back leg. You'd want it to be more straight there. And then we'd want what do we want? We want to look at his heel strike here. So this is where he does land with the knee straight, which is great. We want a straight knee there. Yeah, this knee bends a little bit too. You know what? I don't even know really what's relevant from this side view right now in terms of his sagittal plane. The main distortions were really in that rotational plane of motion. This one, like, I don't know, I could say things, but I don't know if there's anything really meaningful I'm getting from this angle. I'd be curious if anybody takes more time looking at sagittal plane gait. I'd be curious what you see other than his head being a little bit forward. So we're just going to stop there before I just ramble on with stuff that's not even useful. As a nice general thing to consider when we're doing gait analysis as practitioners is to make note of the things that you actually know that you're seeing, and to disregard the stuff that, or not disregard, but not to dwell on the stuff that you have questions about, just for our own sanity and for being able to do something practically useful for people. If in our minds we're trying to help a person and we're like, but I don't know about this thing and I really want to know, and then we get lost in our heads and we get out of the moment with this body that we're working with, then there are some really clear things we're seeing here that could be better spent focused on than the stuff that is uncertain. So, but it's fun here just to speculate and get lost in my brain a little bit. I guess that's what I'm doing these videos for, is to give myself permission to get lost in my brain, because I don't always get that opportunity when I'm working with someone and I have to make decisions a bit more quickly. Anyway, so thank you, Tom, for submitting your video. Super interesting to see. Tell us about your injury history. Please make a note for us in the comments of the video. Curious about that right elbow and that right foot. You fill in the blanks. And for anyone who has any questions or observations, comments, stuff that they saw that is worth noting, please write your own comments as well. And we can learn together about what we're all seeing uniquely. So thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Project GaitWay. Hope this was interesting, useful, entertaining, whatever. And tune back in for another video soon.